Through all the years that I've been doing applique and have taught applique and included applique in this quilt or the other, one of the most common questions from students and from my own self when I'm finished with the applique portion is, how am I going to quilt this? And many years ago I realized that there are some really good ways to quilt around applique and some ways that are just not very effective. Basically speaking, what happens with applique is that we usually have a lot of curves in applique, lots of undulating moving lines, and this is filled with curves. It may not be filled with circles, which are complete curves, but everything is kind of soft and curvy. Even the sides of the leaves and the points of the leaves are all soft and curvy. The reason I bring this to your attention is that when your motifs are soft and curvy, then your quilting needs to be more linear. If you're making a piece design that's very linear with lots of angles on it, then you can add something very curvy in the quilting. You want that juxtaposition. The reason we want that juxtaposition is because one shows off the other. If we put a bunch of curvy quilting around curvy designs, then they get lost in each other, and or they can overwhelm each other, one or the other. So generally speaking, one of the best things you can do with applique is to put a crosshatch. Now, crosshatch is simply those diagonal lines that are somewhat equally dispersed, moving in one direction and then moving in the opposite diagonal direction. And if you've ever seen appliqued vintage quilts, at least every other appliqued vintage quilt that I've ever seen has a crosshatch quilted in it, usually by hand. Well, crosshatches ask for straight lines, and I do not want a free motion quilt straight lines. I only want a free motion quilt wavy lines, or slightly curvy lines. So these are going to be slightly curvy lines that I'm going to be quilting in here, and I'm basically going to show you how to crosshatch in the background space around applique. Now, that being said, I would normally be using black thread on this black fabric. So whatever color my background is, that's the color thread I would be using. But today I'm going to be using some dark gray because I want you to be able to see it. So keep in mind, if you're doing this on your own, you want to match that thread to the background. Now, I have a flower on here with 3 leaves, and the flower is offset. It's not in the center. And the leaves are offset too. This happens to come through the diagonal center. And so I folded it diagonally in half this way and folded it diagonally in half that way and sort of marked those diagonals. And I'm going to eyeball, meaning I'm not going to measure anything, from those diagonals and use those to begin sewing. So what I'm going to do is just quilt a portion of this so that you get a gist of it. And I'm going to start right here on this diagonal, bring my bobbin thread up, and knot off. So I'm going to move my quilt back and forth ever so slightly as I stitch and knot off. And then I'm going to stitch a slightly wavy line out here to the edge, like so. Then I'm going to follow the edge to do my traveling, because that edge is going to be, if this is a border, is going to be gone or taken up in the binding. And when I get to the applique, I'm going to follow the edge of the applique. So I'm going to move over the width that I want my lines apart, which in this case is going to be about 1 inch. And I'm going to make another wavy line. I'm going to go ahead and cut this and get this thread out of my way. So my wavy lines are about 1 inch apart. Now I'm going to follow the edge of this flower about 1 inch away and do another wavy line. And I'm just going to keep doing those wavy lines about 1 inch apart, and using the edge of that applique to travel along. Or the side of the block. Now I'm going to turn this whole block, and you can see what I've done so far. So my lines are slightly curved, and they are about 1 inch apart. And now I'm going to be doing this portion, and I'm going to try to line my lines up with the lines I already have there. But I'm going to finish this corner first. So I'm going to come down here, go across, and this time I'm going to go all the way across because I can. There's no applique in my way. Move over about an inch, one more, and then do my corner. Now I'm going to come back along here, like so. And I want to kind of eyeball, like I said before. If I felt like I couldn't, I could pull a ruler up here if I needed to kind of get a better idea. But basically I'm shooting for that. So I'm just going to stitch across. And when I get there, kind of hook up to it. Now I'm going to follow along this applique till I get to this portion where that line is. And continue that line. And keep in this vein. Now, I've got this kind of deep point in there, and I have to decide, does this line go all the way down in there? And it probably does, right down in here or so. So I'm going to go down into the undulation, come around, and bring my line across. Now here my leaf is going to get in the way, and I'm just going to follow around it as necessary. So I'm going to go back. This is where my line would end. I'm going to go around here and pick that line back up about right there. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come down in here, a short little line, follow around that leaf again. Pick up where that line should come over here. So you see that I'm just using the shape of the applique to follow around to get to where I need to make the rest of that line or to make the next line. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to go the opposite direction. So I'm just going to do this little guy right here. It's going to go right about to there. Okay, so I would go ahead and finish this, but for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and move in the opposite direction now. So I could stitch down there if I wanted to, or I can simply come down here, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come down to this corner, and I'm going to stitch from this corner in and do my opposite diagonal line. And stop whenever I get to an applique. Go around that applique to get to where I want to make my next line, or continue that line. So this line looks like it needs to continue to about right here. Follow that shape till I get to the 1 inch mark, or about an inch, and come back. And there you have it, a wavy crosshatch in the background of our applique. So this is a wonderful way to really show off an applique design. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's no keeping those lines exactly a certain amount apart. And because it's wavy, there's no imperfection in the line. If you're trying to quilt straight lines, every little mistake that you make is going to be highly noticeable. If you're quilting wavy lines, everything is supposed to be the way it is. Everything, whatever happens, happens, and it all looks fabulous. So next time you're thinking about how to quilt behind applique, consider doing this wonderful wavy crosshatch.